Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Poultry Keepers 360 Live. We're happy you're here, and we're happy to be with you tonight. We've got a really good show coming up for you because coming up, we're going to share with you how you can give your baby chicks a strong start so they can reach their full genetic potential later in life. So I know you're wondering what in the world you can do to ensure your chicks get that strong start they need. So Jeff Maddox is going to share with us exactly what we need to do to help them succeed. Jeff, take it off.
Thanks, Rip. I'm not sure I'm going to share everything they need to know, but we're going to hit some high points of, I think, things that were often neglected. Look, folks, you need to understand that every infant, doesn't matter whether it's human or other, requires extra attention in the beginning of its life. So the chicks are actually no different than this. And I think a lot of people fail to understand actually what's happening in that first 2 weeks or that first 14 days. So, as soon as that chick pops out, and we've got a couple of links for you that we're going to share, and hopefully you'll go look at them, read them, things like that. But you know, I'm referencing the Hubbard Breeder website as far as managing and rearing specialty chicks, premium chicks. And Hubbard starts right out with premium chicks need special attention the first week of life because they're different. They have because of their different genetic characteristics. Okay, this is coming right out of large scale, breeder world data. Right, they're telling people extra attention first week. Right, first week of life is key to ensure future performance. Okay, and I want to reiterate that the first week of life is a key to ensure what that bird's going to turn out like, right? I see a lot of birds that don't get the right attention when they're, day olds in that first week. They just kind of throw them in a pen, live or die. Here's your food and water. And that body weight actually increases 3 to 4 times in that first week, from when that chick is hatched, or should, right? So, how many people are actually weighing your chicks when they come out of the hatcher? Don't raise your hand. Karen probably is. So, yeah, we do have. But knowing that weight and monitoring that weight, and we did that weighing thing earlier. We haven't talked about it a whole lot since. I don't know where we're at with it, but weighing the birds throughout their life. And, the industry does this. They do it on a larger scale. They're weighing the birds every 7 days. And, so they're tracking that progress. And once they have benchmarks and they know where that bird's supposed to be at day 7 and day 14, day 21, et cetera, they can tell if there's an issue or if there's not an issue. So they're using those again as benchmarks to know if they're doing it right.
Jeff, if I could just interject something here.
Sure.
And when I first got started in exhibition poultry, if there was a mistake to be made, I probably made it at least twice. Um, but what Jeff is saying is absolutely right. It's paying attention to the small details, and it's doing what Karen does: weigh those baby chicks. Uh, you can't give them too much attention, is my philosophy. But you don't want to smother them at the same time. You want to let chickens be chickens. Make it as natural for them as you possibly can, but pay attention to the details. Sorry to get carried away, Jeff.
No, no,
All right.
no. Yep.
I got a
No.
question too.
Okay.
So we're talking first 7 days. Can we talk a little bit about the whole ship chicks thing? Like, chicks can go 3 days without eating, but that's not ideal, is it? I mean, do we wait to feed them till they're 3 days old so that they can absorb their
No.
yolk?
Yeah, I mean, we really shouldn't do that. And one of the points down below is actually feeding them within 6 to 12 hours after hatch stimulates the development of the chick's gastrointestinal system, right? So the sooner you can feed them, the healthier they're actually going to be. And it
Jeff, I saw,
stimulates,
sorry.
huh?
No, I was just going to say I saw one study where they're actually feeding chicks in the incubator before they're ever pulled from the incubator to go to the brooder.
Yeah. I mean, the sooner you can get them on feed, the better, because that first feed is what's going to stimulate that reabsorption, promotes the reabsorption of the yolk. So the faster that yolk actually reabsorbs, once it finds feed, then it, it feels more secure. So it can reabsorb that yolk much faster instead of being 5 to 7 days or 3 to 5 days, depending on the bird. Right. But that all goes into, weight and growth and development. So again, the faster you can get them on feed, the better off we're going to be. And, the industry is hoping to get them on feed within the first 6 to 12 hours. Right. So they're hatching them. They're driving them like crazy to, their farm, wherever they're going to be. They get them out. Their feed and water is already in place. And there's feed and water everywhere. Karen, where's that pan picture?
That's not perfect, but
Yeah.
Which one did you want?
That battery brooder where they had the feed pan on the floor. Yeah. So you literally want at least 50% of the floor space where the chicks are going to be covered in feed. Now you can use pans like this, which is great. A lot of folks don't have the pans, so they actually put down brown craft paper, like paper, the grocery bag paper sacks, the brown. You want it unfinished. You don't want, you don't want a slick side to it, because the birds can slip on it. It can, pop the tendon out of the back joint. You've just lost a valuable chick. But you're spreading feed out all over the place. Typically, we'll put the feeders that they're going to be eating in the middle of that paper and scatter feed around it. But we don't really want them to have access to bedding. We don't really want them to have access to the ground. We need them to be somewhat of a protected environment that first 2 to 3 days. And we want to make sure that they've gotten something to eat. So everywhere they walk, they're either bumping into water or they're bumping into feed. And
Jeff,
yeah, yes, sir.
how soon should they introduce grit to the chicks?
I usually tell people day 3, because the chick doesn't really know what it is. So I want to get the crop and the gizzard full quick as I can, and do we have that gizzard or that crop picture that Rip? Did you pick
Yes.
one out? Okay. So, hopefully, after tonight, folks will be looking at crop fill, and, within that first 8 hours after the bird's placed, you want to go in there and you want to look, and it looks like they kind of swallowed a marble. Okay. And you can see the difference in these 2 chicks. You want at least 80% of those chicks to have their crop filled within that first 8 hours. And after 24 hours, you're looking for a 96, 95, 96% crop fill. So that crop being full, the sooner, again, we're back to the sooner they find feed, the sooner they get that crop going. This actually sets their appetite for life, how much they're going to want to eat and how frequently and all that. But the sooner we get food in their system and the sooner we get them growing, the healthier they're going to be, right? So in that first week, we're looking at, that first week is going to set like the skeletal, the physiology, the immunity, everything that's going to happen in that bird. We're basically setting the blueprint for the entire life of that bird. Okay. So being in control, and this goes really good with our conversation about hatching eggs, buying chicks, buying birds. We don't know what happens 2 weeks ago when we had that conversation. We don't know how that bird was treated in that first 14 days. So something's out of our control. And what I'm alluding to is, if it's not done right the first 14 days, we're going to see in maturity, we're going to see deficiencies in that bird that are responsible as far back as that first week of life. And it's
let me
that's a
throw this
lot.
out there,
Yeah, go
Jeff,
ahead.
because I know some of the folks in the exhibition world seem to think that they can take birds that didn't get this good start we're talking about, and but they can correct all of that in the conditioning coop just before a show, and that's not possible if you don't set it right the first 7 to 14 days. You can't make it up. You can't overcome what you've lost.
That's very true, and and I agree with you 100%, Rip. And I mean, we have generations of birds out there that may not have been raised right in that first 14 days, and people through selection and breeding and other things have overcome that. I'm just curious, and this may even go to Karen's situation, because I know that she is taking good care of her chicks. Is her genetics now, she's complaining about having overweight birds, right? All of her birds are bigger than the standard. Well, the person that she got the breeding stock from, you know, 10 years ago may not have been taking care of those birds correctly. So when she bought them, they might have been in the standards, the weights of the standards. Now, being fed better, being managed better, being taken, the whole bit all the way through, we're seeing the true genetic potential. And that's actually my biggest fear for the people that are listening or going to watch this later is you may end up seeing things in your breed and you may hate me when this is all said and done, because now you're going to bring out more of the real attributes that this genetic line that you have is there. Okay. So just know that there might be a skeleton in the closet that we don't know about, and it may show up. For some of you, I'm sorry if that happens, but our job is to raise the healthiest birds as quick as we can, day one, and see what their true genetic potential is. So some things may show up, and whether it's there too. I kind of get a kick out of on the Facebook page for Poultry Keepers and poultry breeder nutrition and so on. People refer to they grow too fast. There really is no such thing as growing too fast. Okay, it's the genetic potential of the bird, right? Give them good feed, give them what they want. From day one to about 6 months of age, there shouldn't be any feed restriction. Okay, that bird is still growing and developing for that first 6 months. So what you get is what the true genetics are. Now, if you don't like what you got, I'm sorry, but that's what you've got. So, and
well, you got it. You have to know what you have. I mean, you can't cull something that's hidden under there. So, I mean, bringing everything out into the open is necessary.
Yeah, but I mean, now you're selecting for smaller birds to get them back into the standard, right? But there's really nothing wrong with, according to the standard, there's something wrong with your birds. But for somebody who wanted to use them in a real world situation as egg layers, dual purpose for meat and other things, there's nothing wrong with the breed strain that you have, being slightly overweight. It's just the person before you, that's what they selected for, and that's where we're at, and that's fine.
Can't talk me into that. They're going to be more productive when they're smaller. They're going
Sure.
to lay more eggs. I'm
Right.
confident we're going to make
I'm
that
not,
happen.
but that's okay.
In 10 years, I'll get back to you. Yeah.
I mean, how many eggs what's your average eggs per hen now? Okay. Yeah. All right. See how you are? Okay.
Well, just each bird has their own. It's too complicated. So, yeah.
Yeah. Now, when the show's over, Karen, is there a way to plop up these show notes at the end so people can come back and reference them or not? Or are they just going to have to keep replaying the video?
Rip can upload the document to the Facebook group, right?
Yeah,
Rip? The files.
all the documents we're going to talk about tonight have been uploaded to the Poultry Keepers 360 file section on our Facebook group. So you can go there and download them as PDFs. They're ready to rock and roll whenever you want them.
All right. And I think he wants this one too, the one that's called Show Notes 100-422. That's today. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
It's not 100. Yeah.
Yeah,
I can
giving
put
me a
that
hard
up with
time.
you.
Yep. All right, so let's talk about feed in that first 14 days. The Hubbard Breeders tells you to start out on a crumble because you have a more uniform piece and part, and so there's not going to be as much diet selection, sorting, etc. That's fine. You can also do it with a mash as long as it's a uniform particle size mash. There's no reason why you can't do that, and whichever way you want to go is fine. I'm not going to take sides here. If it's easier for you to go buy a bag of chick starter crumbles, do that. Please don't get medicated. People don't understand that medicated feed is actually, amprolium is blocking thiamine, which is a B vitamin. So it's a thiamine inhibitor, and you're not really helping your chick out. And there's really no need to be fighting something that you don't have, right? All you're trying to do is prevent them from getting coccidiosis. There's other methods for doing that. So a non-medicated chick starter is going to work just fine. So is there any questions at this point? Do you got that picture of that feed? People are going to lose their mind when they see this picture.
Yeah. So, let's see. All right, there you go.
All right, folks, you see that? That's actually a chick starter. Okay. Now, I'm not going to argue with you. I'm telling you, this is real feed, real world. These people are using this from day one through finish. The chicks will not eat pieces that they're not capable of swallowing. So there's going to be a few pieces of whole corn left in the feeder eventually. And that's perfectly fine. You can throw away a few pieces of whole corn. You can take it out to your adult birds. They're going to love you for it. It doesn't matter. But good, chunky, coarse, you really want the bird eating the biggest particle size that it can get down its throat and into its crop and down into the gizzard. It's going to stimulate better gizzard function. It's going to get the gizzard working harder earlier. And those birds are going to be fine. And there's people out there right now rolling their eyes thinking, Jeff has lost his mind. But you see that powder? Chickens don't like powder. How many people watching this show actually, every one of you hates powder, right? I hear it all the time. Oh, my birds hate powder. My birds hate powder. It's like, okay, so don't feed them powder. They're looking for a particle size about 1/8 of an inch wide and 1/4 of an inch long. That's pretty big, and they can handle it. Okay, they're going to be perfectly fine.
You're talking large fowl. I've heard a rumor that bantams really can choke on feed. Is that not?
Any chicken can choke on feed if it gets too excited when it's eating. Okay. So, yeah, and it can choke on powder. So the people that are limit feeding and their cups are empty and they're limit feeding too hard, that their bird's appetite is that, just insane. Okay. The other thing is, where birds can see other birds, there's a sense of competitiveness as far as when it comes feeding time, and they'll eat too fast, right? But they can choke on powder just as much as they can choke on a whole kernel of corn. It's how fast they're eating, and why are they eating that fast? So just slow them down, and if you think they're eating too fast, make it a wet mash, just soak it in some water. That'll help it all slide down easier. So
I can attest to that because I ordered some trio white old English game bantams and had them shipped here from Texas. And I just put them in the pen, put the water in there, put the feed in there, and that male apparently was so hungry, he was just aggressively eating that feed, and I turned around and he was dead. He just choked on it.
Yeah. So you almost need to, in your case, Rip, you just kind of want to give them a little bit and just kind of work them up a little bit at a time. Mm-hmm. But yeah, he must have been starved coming from. How long was he in transit?
About 9 hours.
Yeah. He may have had anxiety issues too by the time he got there. So,
yeah.
it,
All right.
it also sounds a bit like he said, if he was cup fed in his previous life, where he's only gets a little bit at a time, so he knows when that food's down there, he better eat it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He might have been conditioned to eat
And
everything.
knowing where they came from, that's entirely possible.
And we're not saying anybody did it wrong. It's just
No.
a difference in how things are done at different locations. And all right, back to the first 14 days. So actually, when you get done with the crumbles, somewhere around day 14, if you haven't already started on a mash feed, which I know most of you aren't going to because you got to have pellets and crumbles, but you can. Hubbard Breeders actually says you can moderate that growth factor slightly by feeding mash. Okay. Give the bird a chance to sort through some feed, look for pieces and parts that it's after. And so that is always an option. If you feel like they're growing too fast, you can always switch them to a mash. Although it hasn't been my experience. But, they did note that finer mash, like that one powdery feed picture that we had there, is it will actually, with a few coarse particles in it. So if the particle size isn't fairly uniform, that'll actually reduce growth more than feeding that coarse mash picture, where there's a scoop full of grain. And it may also reduce the uniformity of the chicks, by having too much particle difference in that feed in the beginning. So you want a feed that's pretty, almost all the particles look similar to the chicks. Look, chickens are greedy buggers. There's no doubt about it. They've researched this time and time again. Chickens always eat for the biggest piece first. Okay. Absolutely. Always will. Going to pick out the biggest piece first. So just know that that's the way it goes. Unless, of course, the biggest piece is bad. So I pulled up another. It was really hard to find information to support what I believe, what I've observed, over my years. But I was able to find one, and this link will be available as well, hatchability.com S5 PDF, done by Vern Christensen. So we're looking at development rates, different physiology systems in the first 7 days. First 7 days, right? Post-hatch, right? Number one, circulatory system, okay? It's going to be rapid and early. I mean, one of the first things that's building on is circulatory system. Same time, it's working on kidney and body fluid systems, digestive system right there, within that first 2 or 3 days. We talked about that earlier. That's happening right after hatch. This is all happening in the first 7 days. Don't think it's going to happen, 6 months down the road. The pattern for this bird's life is happening in the first 7 days. Okay. A bird can't regulate its own body temperature until it's about 14 days old. So watching those birds, seeing how they behave, making sure the temperature is right, actually pick them up and feel their feet. If their feet feel cold, you need to up the temperature a little bit. Okay. And then reevaluate them 4 to 6 hours later. See if the feet are still cold. One way to tell. Rip, have you ever felt chicks' feet? See if they're cold or not? All right.
I do.
Okay. Karen?
Nope.
Okay. Well, we're 50-50. Okay.
I'm terrible to my newborn chicks. You said I treated them well, but I'm a fan of them not being very warm. So
Why?
I just feel like they need to be tested.
You want to harden them off early, huh?
Not terribly, but I mean, yeah, I'm just
I'm
feel like
kind of like Karen. I go back to broody hens hatching baby chicks.
Yeah.
Those chicks are not up under that broody hen a lot. They're out and about. They're hunting stuff to eat. They're running around. If they get cold, then they'll come back. So I try to arrange my brooder to where there is heat on one end and it's cooler on the other end.
And that's the right way to do it, Rip. They have the ability to go to heat and find heat,
right?
Just like the mother hen was there. but they have that ability to be out of that heated area, you know, at ambient temperatures or near ambient temperatures. And that's good because that's, you know, how they start pushing that body temperature development anyway.
Right.
But
Jeff, I will say that for the first few days, I'll put a partition in there that kind of keeps them confined to the warmer area, also to the feed and water until I know that they're eating and drinking the way they should. And then I'll take that partition out and they can do whatever they want to do at that point.
so, Rip, did you always know that, or when did you learn that?
I guess I kind of always knew that. And I've been one that felt like if we can mimic the way chickens would be raised in the wild, that we would have better birds. Um, I think the one kicker to that was if we have better nutrition available to us now than the birds do in the wild. So going back to what you were saying about genetics, it can cause some things to pop up that we might not know is in our line. And of course, that can be a good thing or it can be a bad thing. But if it's a bad thing, we know it's there so we can eliminate it from our line.
Right.
So that's the positive side of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I came straight from reptiles, so they need a basking spot, they need a cool zone, they need one in between. Just what they need. How they
But
going to digest
pretty
their
much
food
the,
otherwise?
pretty much the way hens with chicks do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I meant the crowding part. How did you know to put a petition in there to kind of keep them in the warm zone and make them a lot closer? Because we didn't talk about crowding.
No, we didn't. But
and crowding is important. So.
It's something that I kind of learned because I would go out and I would hear chicks chirping their heads off and screaming and hollering because they were hungry or couldn't find water or were too cold. So I thought, well, I'm not going to give you an option. I'll just shove y'all down to one end of the brooder box.
Yeah. Yeah. So since Rip brought that up, I wanna just kind of push that issue a little bit more. So for the first 3 days, besides having the feed on cardboard or brown paper, feed everywhere, water everywhere, so they can't really go more than 6 or 8 inches without running into food or water. You want 4 birds per square foot, or 1/4 of a square foot per bird, right? So you want to kind of pack them in there that first 3 days to make sure that they found food and water.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The sooner they find food and water, the better they're going to be when they're adults. There ain't no doubt about it. So,
that crop field image that you had up there is something folks ought to burn in their mind. And incidentally, that document has also been uploaded to the file section on the Facebook group. There's a whole document on crop field, but man, that can tell you so much about whether your chicks are eating the way they should or not.
Right. If we can get it, I mean, ideally, we want the crop full, empty, and refilled within the first 24 hours, right? So ideally, you would want the crop filled twice in that first 24 hours. And
so you just put a green Sharpie on them. It's been full. Then you put a red Sharpie on them. It was empty. Now
Karen,
it's full again.
You know what this means, don't you? Since you're weighing your baby chicks, you also need to at least twice a day scoop out all the poop and weigh that.
Oh.
I don't see this happening, but it sounded good when you said it, Rip.
I thought it was great.
I like the Sharpie idea better. Just,
I can see Karen. Karen's a Sharpie fan. She'll be out there tattooing her chicks. Good one.
Yeah.
Crop full. Yeah.
CF, CE, CF. Yeah.
Let's not use red though, because it may attract pecking by the other birds. So let's do something that's non-attractive. Also, in that first 7 days, I didn't finish my list, but respiratory system and immune system starts developing in the first 7 days. You get a really big push on immune system from day 7 to day 14. And you're probably at close to 75% by day 21. But the biggest bump is day 7 to day 14. So for immune systems. And I can't tell you how important that first 14 days is. I'm going to keep saying it until you all get sick of hearing me and I start seeing the viewer numbers going down really quick. Because then,
Don't do
look, huh? No,
Don't do
I
that.
won't do that. I won't do that. But
I agree with you.
Yeah.
And I've kind of always felt that, but the more I learn, the more that's just reinforced in my mind. Um, it's kind of like we don't get a second chance to do this. You got one chance to set them up for success, and if you blow it, there's no getting it back.
Yeah.
So take advantage of those first 14 days, and just help your baby chicks succeed. That's what we're talking about.
So that first 14 days, that's the right time to introduce them to treats and mealworms and greens from outside and carrots and everything, right? That's what's going to make their first 14 days great?
No, not at all. No, not at all. So I know it's hard to hold back on the treats and the mealworms and all that other stuff and the green grass. Their systems aren't ready for that. They're not even close to ready for that. But people are going to do it anyway. You just can't stop them. They think that's the way to go. So now I have heard, and I believe this to be true, that after day 7, getting closer to day 14, if you go get a clean chunk of sod out of your yard with green grass and put it in there, don't clip the grass, just put a piece of sod, with the dirt and the grass in there, and let them start tearing that apart, that there is a lot of benefit to boosting their immune system by letting them tear apart that piece of sod. So, and I can believe that to be true. Yeah.
I have done that.
Yeah.
I agree. One thing we haven't talked about, and for those of you who raise standard bred poultry, different breeds are going to perform slightly differently. But go back to what we're talking about here. Those first 14 days are so critical for your bird success. Even though a large fowl Brahma is not going to perform and grow the same as a large fowl Rhode Island Red, it's just not going to happen. But trust us, the first 14 days are very important.
Along the same lines, Craig is asking if you think it's even more important for smaller chicks from smaller eggs than it would be or it's just so important that it can't be more important because there's nothing more important.
I mean, you can only do so much for the smaller chicks coming out of the pullet eggs, right? And we talked about egg weights and hitting the ideal egg weights, in previous episodes. And it's important to weigh your eggs and pay attention to that. Just because she's a pullet doesn't mean it's going to be a smaller chick. But, selecting the right size eggs instead of hatching everything, wait until that pullet's actually laying a good weighted egg is going to help your progeny, by far. So, yeah, I mean, small chicks coming out of pullet eggs, we need to do everything we can to help them get that great start, early on in life. So that article out of hatchability.com, just to reiterate, there are certain body functions that are actually fully developed within the first 24 hours. Okay. So your circulatory and your kidney and body fluid functions they have to be fully functioning, or they should be fully functioning within the first 24 hours after hatch. I mean, that's pretty important. And if those aren't developed correctly and we're not treating the birds right, we're going to have long-term issues with those with those birds further on down the road. So,
can I throw up a comment
sure.
similar to that? All right. So Will says that he usually leaves them in the incubator for 24 hours once they're totally dried, and then moves them to a brooder and gives them feed and water. So what do you think? That's pretty common where people tell people to leave them in there for a while.
Yeah, right. And I've heard that before as well. I don't know that I would go the full 24 hours. I would try and see if it somewhere around that 8 to 10 hour mark, are they dry enough? Look, they're also going to dry out in a good brooder, right? If the brooder's 95 degrees and the brooder's set up correctly, there's no reason why they have to stay in the hatcher, why they can't go to the brooder. The chick's still going to dry out just fine. So,
unless you've got some sort of bedding in there that's going to cake them.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, but
Me,
we shouldn't have that anyway. Yeah.
No, you shouldn't. Peat moss might stick to them, but it ain't going to hurt them.
Yeah.
So it'll fall off after 24 hours. They'll dry out and everything will be fine again.
So basically, you just need them to be up and at least able to move. Because when they first hatch out of that shell, they just lay there like wet lumps of nothing. So, I mean, they could get trampled easily if the other half of the birds are running around crazy. So I feel like they need to be up and able to move successfully.
Right. Yeah. And how long in the hatcher is that? I mean,
Rip's gonna take my gut would be like 5 hours at least. But
and one thing that I've observed, and maybe it's just coincidental with my experiences, but the chicks that were not completely dry that I pulled and put into the brooder seem to dry and fluff faster in the brooder than they do in the incubator. And I attributed this to there's more humidity in that incubator than there is in the brooder. So that actually helped dry them and fluff them a little bit faster.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I would think as soon as they're mobile, regardless of whether they're still damp or not, as long as they can get up and move around on their own and they've got that kind of strength, I would get them into the brooder, as quick as you can.
I was reading and I don't have to go back and see if I can find it now to share with everybody, but I was reading a study about that they studied actually pulling them from the incubator before they were completely dry and what effect it had on them, and it seemed to have no ill effect.
No, it just would seem weird, right? I mean, just from our perspective, not knowing any better, you would think that you'd want them to dry out. But, I'm with you, Rip. I think they're going to dry out better in the brooder than they are in the hatcher, just because of the humidity aspect that you brought up. Mm-hmm. There's going to be lower humidity in that brooder.
Well, and a lot of times they look wet longer than they actually are. Like, you know what I mean? It's that stiffness that they get that they have to rub against things to get all that dander off that sort of can make them look wet even when you touch them. They're not physically wet. They just look.
Their feathers aren't. Yeah.
They just haven't flooded.
Yeah.
All right. Did you have more, or shall we start on?
Yeah, we can start on questions. I think I beat that horse long enough,
Well, you're going to answer it with all the questions.
And we got some good questions. I've been looking through here.
Good.
All right. So Craig says, again, bantams. I actually grind the crumbles in the blender for the first few weeks. So,
Craig, if that makes you happy, that's fine, but you don't have to. Okay. I think some of us overthink that particle size for those chicks just because they're smaller. We think. If I was going to grind them in the blender to make them smaller, I would probably actually think about adding some water to make, like a wet mush, to also get them hydrated at the same time. In that first feeding and that first, 8 to 24 hours, I would think about adding some water to it. But
let me throw a question out there, Jeff, and I know a lot of folks do it regularly and believe in it, but what about feeding baby chicks eggs, mashing it up and feeding them?
Yeah, hard-boiled eggs is great. And, actually, if a particular farm has had any issues with illness, let's say they had a little bit of bronchitis go through or something else that they're, they feel might be hiding in their flock somewhere, actually not cooking the egg, but actually taking some eggs, from, particularly if the bird's on the ground and is able to free range it all, but taking some of those eggs and mixing it in that feed at strategic. I wouldn't do it in the first 3 days. I like to do it somewhere around day 6 or 7, and then do it again day 13, 14, and then one more time out there at 20, 21. But you're actually giving them extra immunoglobulins, or antibodies, if you will, against the bacteria and the pathogens that live at your farm. And
Excellent
so
point.
you're boosting their immune system by giving them raw eggs and just mixing it right into their feed. And one egg will inoculate easily 25 to 30 chicks, right? You can mix that in a daily dose of feed with one egg. And if you know which hens have had illnesses in the past, they're the ones to harvest the eggs from for doing that. So if you got a wrinkly egg, which means she's had Newcastle or IBR or something like that, then that's a hen. And you can actually harvest those eggs and freeze them. You can actually put those into the old-fashioned ice cube trays. Some of us are old enough to know what an ice cube tray is, because
I still have
before ice makers. And you can put the egg in an ice cube tray and freeze them, and then you can pop them out of there, put them in a bag. You can thaw them out later, warm them up, mix them in with the chick feed. It's an excellent immune booster. Okay, so absolutely. I just didn't figure this crowd would be willing to do it, but I've done this a lot on larger scale, commercial type poultry, where I'm fighting an illness on a specific farm. I'll take, from that rogue hen that at least seems to want to wander everywhere on the property. That's the one I want to do it, because she's gotten into everything, right? She's scratched through cow dung. She's, been to the compost pile. She's been everywhere. She's got the best immunoglobulins for those chicks.
So your Mediterranean bird. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeff, you just reinforced what I've always felt, that there's value in plundering.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, a lot of farms have that rogue bantam hen that you just can't seem to catch her up and just let her run wherever. And her eggs are going to be the most perfect, because they get into everything. I mean, when we had bantams at my house, I had one small black bantam hen, and she would just go, you didn't know where you were going to find her, right? She was in the flower bed. She was in the garden. She was in, you name it, she was there. So hers would have been the perfect eggs to inoculate or, boost those chicks.
And Craig, I will tell you that I tried that grind feed in the blender one time. It did not go well in my household.
The wife was not pleased with you, was she?
No.
Let's have a dedicated grinder. Speaking of Karen's therapy sessions, I just realized there's something that I do that I have no idea if it's necessary and sounds like a bad idea, but I actually water them first. I wait a good hour before I give them feed after I give them water. I feel like they need to hydrate, but I think that might be back to the shipping of chicks. Like when I had my very first chickens ever shipped, I think maybe that's where that came from, but there's no reason to water them first, is there?
I don't really think so, Karen, but I do it. I take them out of the incubator to the brooder, and actually each chick dip their beak in the water and set them down by the water, and they'll drink a few. And honestly, I think the reason I do that is because the way my grandmother taught me to do it.
Yeah. I'm a beak dipper as well.
Yeah. But you don't withhold, right? Like literally, I set a timer and I go back in an hour and give them feed.
No, there's food and water available as soon as they hit the ground. I want them tripping over kernels of corn and feed. And I know we've given the recipe before, and I saw somebody ask about electrolytes. Look, 2 ounces of apple cider vinegar, a couple ounces of sugar, mix that per gallon of drinking, per gallon of that early water, mix that up really good. It's going to work as good as any electrolyte mix that you want. If you feel like you need to go a little bit further in that gallon, put a half a teaspoon of salt, shake it up. It's a win-win. So, and you can use molasses or sugar. Now, molasses puts off an odor, so it could get the birds to actually start drinking sooner. So a couple tablespoons of cooking molasses, you can get it at most grocery stores. a couple ounces of vinegar, half a teaspoon of salt, mix it up really well, serve it, put it all over the place for the first 24 hours.
I have
So
grown to be not a fan of commercial electrolytes just because there's so much salt in most of them.
there's way too much salt in them. Yeah. And, remember that kidney and that body fluid system is developing in that first 24 hours. I don't want to damage those kidneys with salt. Okay. I want to get as much fluid in that bird in that first 24 hours I can. Same way with the feed, get those systems working, but too much salt is a bad thing. So I just soon make my own electrolyte, and Gatorade doesn't work that well. So people that are thinking about going and buying some Gatorade, that's not the right thing to do. So.
All right. So,
Jeff,
go ahead.
one other thing about water, and then I'll shut up and we can go on, Karen. But water, warm water, cool water, which is better?
In the brooder, that water needs to be brooder temperature. So it needs to be within a few degrees of 95. So it should be 90 to 95 degrees. That water should have been already in that brooder for a full 24 hours before. That brooder should have been set up 24 hours before the chicks ever hatched. So I know that doesn't happen. I can't tell you how many horror stories I've heard. Oh, my chick showed up a day early by accident and my brooder wasn't set up. It's like,
Yeah.
I can almost predict that like 10%, 10 to 15% loss when a brooder is not ready to go when those chicks hatch, right? It needs to be at temperature, warmed up, ready to go, everything in place, 24 hours before the chicks ever show up or hatch or wherever they're coming from. That brooder should be well established before the chicks ever have to get into it.
Dennis is doing the opposite of everybody else. He's screening all his feed and removing the dust and small particles, which allows only the larger uniform pieces to be fed. So
we're going to see all variations of, ways of doing this.
Yeah.
But, look, those chicks can handle up to the size of an oat grain or a wheat berry, or, they're perfectly fine with particle size up to that. And, they were born with a grinder. So if we start getting that chick grit into them, which can also be just coarse sand at day 3, then we're in good shape. I mean, I prefer the granite, but if you can't get it, chick grit starting at day 3, if it's mixed into the feed, day 1 is fine. But for people who want to put a separate pan of grit in there, I would wait till day 3 because they don't know yet what grit is and what feed is. So I need to get some energy into them. I need to get those body systems going. Yeah.
Feed is definitely the most important up to that point.
All right. So Alex wants to know, how soon can you provide a dust bath? And then once you do, what do you recommend safe to use for chicks?
I mean, we brooded here at Trail on peat moss, and we noticed that day 7, day 8, we already had chicks starting to dust bath in the peat moss. So peat moss is a natural dust bathing kind of medium anyway. It's really sterile. The birds don't eat it because it's different. It's dark and it doesn't look like feed. So you can start offering a dust bath, at the end of the first week. They should, they're going to start thinking about it. Each breed's a little bit different. But look, we were doing a field trial with Cornish Cross. And if a Cornish Cross has enough intelligence or instinct coming through after what they've done to that breed, that they want to start dust bathing at day 7, 8, 9, then, the heritage breeds or fancy breeds are going to want to start doing it, should be doing it a few days earlier than that.
Okay. All right. So this is, I've already missed it. My gut says mandolin, but I'm not sure. Oh, no, somebody. Anyway, I think some handling and regular observation of chicks is critical in the early days, that you can gather a decent amount of information. Do you have any opinions on handling of chicks young?
I think, how can you go by the brooder and not pick some up? I mean, if you're not inspired every time you go to the brooder to pick up a chick or two, then why are you raising chickens? I mean, you're just, yeah. I mean, here's a young fellow who's starting life right. Every time they get a new batch of chicks or turkey poults, he's out there. He just lays down with them. He loves cuddling them. You know, this guy's going to be the chicken wrangler of the world before long. So his name is Liam.
So,
And
yes,
that is peat moss bedding. So
his clothing just suffered for that.
at his age, no matter where he goes, his clothing will suffer. So,
But y'all did the trial with turkeys, right? We know turkeys really benefit from intense handling and socialization, but that's
oh,
not
yeah.
really been true with baby chicks.
Nobody's done the trial, but I actually believe the more attention and the more socialization that you do with them, the faster they're going to grow. I can't tell you.
Yes.
Look, they've even measured plants, house plants. The more attention that you give a house plant and talk to it and stuff like that, it responds to it. It's a plant. Okay. So you can't convince me that a chicken is not going to respond to personal attention. So I'd be going to the brooder every couple of hours, pick a few chicks up, make sure everybody's happy, make sure somebody's not doing something stupid, like jumped inside the feed bucket and can't get out, or yeah. I mean, just go check on them, spend time with them. I mean, we raise chickens for a reason, isn't it? To spend time with them. So,
All right. I'm going to put a question up, but I have a lot more
okay,
questions to figure out. So,
okay.
what's your advice when you're having chicks shipped in? Do you spring for the grow gel? Does that help?
I don't know that the grow gel really does help. Basically, it's just plain gelatin. There's not a whole lot of nutrients in it. It's more of a hydration thing than it is. It's not food. So there's no carbohydrates, no proteins, nothing to really. Depends on how far they're coming from. A 2 or 3 day ship, I do find that the grow gel helps, keeps them hydrated till they get there, which is helpful. But I'm 50-50 on grow gel personally. I don't know that it's a big benefit.
Jeff, I will say, if we stop and think about how many millions of chicks have gone through the mail in this country before grow gel was ever invented,
Yeah.
and they made the trip just fine. I shipped hundreds of Rhode Island Reds over the years, most of them before grow gel was invented, and I never added anything in there, and the chicks made the trip just fine.
Yep.
All right. Bill wants to know if local honey can be added to the water instead of cane sugar.
I've heard both ways. In my opinion, yes, honey can be added. Molasses has a little bit more smell than the sugar does. Sugar doesn't really give the water an odor that would attract the birds like the molasses does. But so you're going to need to dip the beaks. But I don't have any problem with honey. I've had some people tell me that the honey can trigger some allergic issues if given too early. I don't know if that's true or not, Bill. So, I mean,
they're
you can try it,
extrapolating
but I
from
don't know.
human beings there.
Yeah.
All right, Claudia, you got a lot, so I got to hurry now. Is there an age that using raw eggs for that word is not beneficial? For example, if she has 4 to 5 week old chicks, is there any use at this point?
Yeah, there still is at this point. So, because we're doing heritage breeds or fancy breeds, I would say up to 6 weeks is probably your cutoff. I would be looking at doing it once a week, at the end of each week. And I think there's still some benefit of doing that. Even once they're mature, believe it or not, if you see an illness starting in your flock, actually breaking eggs and giving it to adult birds still has some benefit. It's just not as drastic of a benefit. It's not it's a much smaller vaccination, if you will, than, giving it to the chicks while they're developing.
All right. All right. This one was science. Have you ever seen research about well water and added electrolytes resulting in ascites in meat chicks?
I have not.
Very specific.
Yeah. I have not.
Share it if you have some out there.
Yeah.
Put the link to it. Yeah. All right. Along those same lines, and I missed it, but is there any additional information than what we talked about if you are raising meat birds? I mean, do they need a separate handling, different?
They really don't. And the breast is still a heritage enough breed. And actually, I wouldn't be surprised that Hubbard had something to do with the development of the breast breed out there. I would use the same guidelines that we outlined earlier. Pretty much all chicks, and even turkey poults and other exotic fowl, the same regiment, in that first 2 weeks is going to hold true. I haven't found a bird that does not that doesn't work for.
All right, I think we answered this because you talked about so what size should the grit be? And
yeah, I mean, for a chick, you're looking at something like a 1/16 of an inch to an 1/8 of an inch is going to be the right size grit for a chick. And they're only going to be on chick grit for about 7 to 10 days. And then they're going to be big enough to go to grower grit. So they're going to want something a little bit bigger. So you don't need a lot of it. Each chick isn't even going to eat not even 1/4 of an ounce, probably somewhere around an 1/8 of an ounce per chick. And that's even on the high side. So you're looking at 1 ounce of grit for every 8 to 10 birds. So it's not a lot. I mean, if you get a 50-pound bag of starter grit, it's going to last you your lifetime. So.
All right, Matthew. See, he's on my side with the Liam picture. My family has banned me from using peat moss. I got the basement covered in brown film, even after I mixed it with some shavings. How can he keep the dust down?
You can't. There's no way you're going to keep the dust down. So, you don't brood them in the house. That's the easy answer. I mean, sorry, Matthew, but brood them in the garage, brood them in the shed somewhere. Yeah, you're not going to keep the dust down, and it doesn't bother the chicks, and it really doesn't bother humans. But people get all fussed up about it if they got to clean up all that brown dust everywhere. So I can relate to the brown dust. When we were doing our field trials using peat moss, we had brown dust everywhere, and it stays for a long time. It's very hard to get it all cleaned up. So sorry, Matthew, no good answer.
All right, so Marie fills a water dropper, and I'm thinking with egg yolk. I fill a water dropper and squeeze drops into the water so that it makes a splash. The chicks are very attracted to the shiny droplets and encouraged to drink quickly. So
actually, birds do like moving water. So what she's doing is it can just be regular water in that droplet, right? Well, but if you've done this, right? You dump out the water in your chicken, right? And they're chasing it across the ground. Right? For whatever reason, poultry have this affinity to moving water, right? So they'll consume more if it's moving. So just simply, Marie, dribbling a little bit in there, and they see it, and it glistens, catches their eye, and they all come over out of curiosity. And that's a good way to get them to all start drinking, because they're going to chase those drops into the water trough.
Now we all have to buy cat waters for our brooders, the little fountains that try to get your cat to drink. Matthew says he did not like your advice of there's no solution.
I can lie to him. I mean, but that's not really my thing.
All right. So let's see. So we've got 2 comments. One is Laura saying, thank you for doing what we do. And then I've got another question about Laura here. Yeah, I believe that it's her birthday.
It is indeed her birthday. I saw that on Facebook. So
everybody say happy birthday to Laura.
Happy birthday, Laura.
He says he's taking you for a nice dinner, not just dinner. So you have to report back on what you had to eat there. Let's see. All right. Let's see. I think that's basically it. People are saying thank you, but
Okay, we didn't miss anybody, right?
I
yeah.
don't think so.
That,
This has been a good show, and we've had a lot of viewer participation, and that always helps, and it always
Absolutely.
encourages everybody.
so somebody agrees. All right. I think we're gonna sneak out of here.
All right. Thanks everybody for coming.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, and we will see you in 2 weeks right here, same channel, same station.